Swinging a drive. Right field and deep. Back goes Aquino. It's got a chance. Gone. Get out the tape measure. Long gone.
Fly the W!
Cubs fans, it's time to fly the W with Dustin Rhodes and Paul Crawley-Jean.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, I am happy to have on Jason Kempf. He is the new play-by-play voice of your Iowa Cubs. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here and to start to experience what I know is going to be an outstanding season and all that goes with it.
Now, when did you find out that you were going to be the broadcaster of the Iowa Cubs? And did you have to keep it under wraps for a little while? What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was quite the process. I knew the job was open, but it hadn't been necessarily official yet. So it was a process waiting for that to officially go through the channels and then actually applying and going through the interview process. But I put in 1 week in the office as of Tuesday. So I think I found out about 3 weeks ago. It took me a couple of weeks to pack everything up in Charleston, South Carolina, where I was. And we made the drive up here, my wife, a 2-year-old, and a dog. So it was an adventure, but finally starting to settle in a little bit.
And for you being in Iowa, I mean, you're a lot closer to your home. You grew up in Johnsburg in Wisconsin, and you went to the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. Mm-hmm. When you were young, what got you into baseball? Was there a certain team or a certain player that made you say, hey, that's what I want to do?
I don't know that there was a certain moment or player. My dad always played until he was like 40 years old. He played town ball. So every Sunday is when they played. I was at the ballpark the entire time. There was always a game on TV. But obviously growing up in Wisconsin, Bob Uecker was everywhere. And I think just the way that he called the game and was having fun, and there was comedy, and whether you cared about the game or not, you were going to be entertained. That was kind of the thing that made me specifically be interested in broadcasting if I wasn't good enough to play. But baseball is kind of big out in the farm country of Wisconsin, where I'm from. There's not a lot else going on besides going to the ball diamond. So that's what we did.
Yeah. I mean, Bob Uecker, rest his soul, he just passed away. But, I think for Cub fans to understand that he's basically the equivalent of your Harry Carey. I mean, he was doing it forever. He was a part of the fabric of Wisconsin baseball. And I go to Wisconsin a lot, and I would sit there. If there was no Cubs game on the radio, I'd turn on WTMJ and then listen to Bob Uecker calling. I mean, to be able to do it solo, I mean, without a partner sometimes, I mean, that is just that's a different beast altogether.
Yeah, and there were obviously some bad years that he was broadcasting. There wasn't a lot of winning baseball, but he managed to show up every day. And you look at the guys who have worked with him, obviously Pat Hughes, Jim Powell, Joe Block. All of these guys have gone on, Corey Provis, that are now lead broadcasters or were lead broadcasters in Major League Baseball. And I haven't heard anybody say anything negative about their time with Uke. So obviously that news caught everybody off guard a little bit a few weeks ago. But I mean, just an incredible guy that you can't really emulate as a broadcaster. You just have to appreciate what he did and try and take pieces of his style and incorporate them here and there.
Now, as far as it goes, when did you get your first job in the minor leagues? When did you break in?
It was 2013, so it was right after college. I had applied for a number of internships. Kind of the way it goes now, unless you get really lucky, you're a number 2 somewhere, a media relations assistant, something along those lines. And I applied for a few different places, interviewed with 4 or 5 teams, which ironically, I ended up working full-time with all 5 of the teams I interviewed with that first year later in my life. But I ended up with the St. Paul Saints, who were at the time independent and playing in an old Midway Stadium outside of downtown, not the setup they have right now in the International League. But I learned from Sean Aronson, who's the Saints broadcaster. He made his big league debut with the Twins last year. And it was a really cool experience because it was about so much more than baseball. And I think that's what kind of made me a well-rounded minor league baseball employee, which is what it often takes to get your first job. And then you start to meet people and you can make connections from there.
Now, you have spent time in a couple of different affiliates. You've been with the Wichita Wingnuts, and then the Dayton Dragons and the River Bandits, the Quad City River Bandits. And so when I look at that right there, I'm saying to myself, wait a sec, you already worked for two Cubs minor league affiliates. As far as the Dayton is concerned, right? The Dragons?
Well, they were a Reds affiliate, but
Right.
we played South Bend all the time. And so that was I really love South Bend and going there, just the atmosphere and how they've kind of recreated what's going on in Chicago. And then in Quad Cities, same thing. We played South Bend all the time. It was an Astros affiliate at the time. And that was kind of when they were in the midst of their World Series runs, whatever you want to say about those few years. The minor league guys weren't involved, but it was a lot of guys there that were part of their latest runs, like Jeremy Pena, Christian Javier, and those guys. So every place has a special, spot in my mind and memories from there.
So the Dayton Dragons, they started out as an Expos team in Rockford, Illinois. Then they were the Royals, and then from 95 to 98, they were a Cubs affiliate.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and then when I looked at it too with Quad City, I'm saying to myself that I know that was a Cubs affiliate as well. And so, it was a Cubs affiliate from 1979 to 1984. I have right here in my Cubs bobblehead collection a Quad Cities.
There you go.
Sean Dunston bobblehead right here. And so it really is I think it was destiny that you were bound to one day be in a Cubs affiliate again in the Iowa Cubs. And if you've ever been to Iowa, and you've been there for a few days now, but it really has just like a special feel. The people are so great. Principal Park is so awesome right there on a river. How excited were you to settle your family down there, and how familiar are you starting to get with the park now?
Yeah, we were really excited. As you mentioned, a lot closer to home. It was an 18-hour drive from where I'm from in Wisconsin to Charleston, about as far as you can get to the east. And then now we're 5.5, 6 hours away, which is a lot better. And family can come down. We can make trips home during the off season. And it just makes things a lot easier, especially while I'm traveling on the road on my wife and my daughter. To see people that they know a lot more often is really cool. And showing up at Principal Park for the first time, like I had lived in Iowa when I was in Quad Cities, but never made it to Des Moines. And you're really impressed after spending a few years in Single A. AAA Stadium is much larger, and the amount of seats and the suites and the press box, everything is first class. And Randy Wayhofer, our assistant GM, came and gave me a tour the day before I started on President's Day. So there was nobody else there. Got to see the clubhouses, the workout facility, and just a fantastic place. They've redone the clubhouses here in the last couple of years. So it's a pretty awesome setup, and I can't wait to see it, in action in exactly 30 days now.
Now, your last job was with the Charleston River Dogs, and that's in the Carolina League, and you got that job in 2020. Now, of all the times to kind of get the job, how hard was it for you that 2020 year? And you got to call some pretty good seasons for Charleston.
Yeah, so we were talking about how excited I was to move here with my family to Des Moines. We were really excited to go to Charleston. We had never really been outside of the Midwest. So we get there, and I work in the office for probably 25 days. And that's when the Big Ten tournament got canceled. And then you were like, okay, this could be a problem. And then you're into April, and they're like, we're going to postpone the season. Everything got pushed back. And all of a sudden, I was furloughed, so I didn't have a regular paycheck. My wife works in a hospital system at that time. They weren't hiring anybody. So we kind of hunkered down for a year, enjoyed some more time with just us than we have ever before during the summer, and did some things we normally couldn't do. But I'm glad to be on the other side of that, certainly after a tough start there in Charleston. And like you said, the first 3 years I was there, we won the Carolina League championship. They hadn't won a championship in 99 years. And my first year we won, and then we won again, and then we won again. And it was ironic because Myrtle Beach was always our number one rival. They're right down the road. They were always really good when you had PCA, when James Triantos was there, the Jaguar was there. And I know firsthand how much our coaching staff hated facing those guys. So it became kind of a fun rivalry, and Sam and I would go back and forth, Sam Wiederhaft, and just talk trash a little bit. And luckily we got the best of him a few times in a row.
Yeah, and when you get to call those championship games, what was it like for you as far as the first time that you were able to call that? Did you kind of have it prepared out in your mind in advance, like kind of what you were going to say, or are you just going to roll with it?
I don't think you can, if you have it prepared, you're not doing justice to the moment. So I had an idea of a couple of things I wanted to say because it had been nearly a century. And I think I ended up saying when we won the first one that it took a long time to play baseball again. I had the number of days from the end of the 2019 season and then the cancellation of 2020 into 2021. I had the number of days. It was like 600 days to play baseball. And in the end, it was worth the wait or something like that. But I didn't have it scripted. I just wrote a few things down that I wanted to touch on at some point in the first 2 minutes or so after the final out. And fortunately, we had won the first 2 games of a best-of-5 series, then lost the next 2, but we scored 7 runs in the first inning of the decisive game. So I had some time to realize, okay, we're probably going to find a way to win this. And after that, the second and the third one were a lot easier and more comfortable.
So you got to call basically 3 championships. So my guess is now that you're here with the Iowa Cubs, you'll be able to call a few more. You are the lucky voice that's going to get the Iowa Cubs that championship right there. And you mentioned, you were in the same league with Myrtle Beach and Sam, and Sam is just absolutely great. And you got to know probably, I'm sure, a lot of the South Bend broadcasters and everything, but the whole family, when you talk about Sam and Brendan King and Mick Gillespie, all the guys, I mean, it's just a really great family. And hopefully, next year you'll come to Chicago for Cubs convention, and then you'll really see what the Cubs family is like.
Yeah, that's the plan. I can't wait to be able to do that, hopefully next winter. And Sam is one of my best friends in baseball. Alex Cohen was one of my best friends in baseball. He's one of my best friends since I met him, I think, back in 2016 when he was still in Bowling Green, which was ironically a Rays affiliate back then when he was there. So there's all kinds of connections. And it's really cool how everybody, to a man or a woman, says that being part of the Cubs organization is special. And from the outside, being from the Midwest, I know, but being on the inside of it, the last 2 or 3 days since it was announced publicly have been, like I said before, a whirlwind.
Now, I know it's been tradition with all the affiliates, all the new broadcast voices, that we do a shot of Malort together. Do you know what Malort is?
I've heard of it.
Okay.
I've heard of it.
Just double check in here. It's kind of like an official thing that we do every year at Lizzie McNeil's during the convention. We'll make sure that you get taken care of when it comes to that. But, your good friend Alex Cohen has left you with an incredible Iowa Cubs team. And not only did he, is that just an incredible team, a whole slew of top 30 prospects on the team. But like you said earlier, you got to know a lot of these prospects when they were playing in Myrtle Beach. Tell us a little bit about some of the Cubs prospects and what you remember. I'll throw a couple names out. You said PCA. What were your first impressions of PCA?
Yeah, that was the name right away. Our bench coach in Charleston that year had coached PCA with Team USA, the high school team. So he told us, like, this kid is legit. He's wild. He has a big personality. And we played him early in the year, and I think he got off to a little bit of a slow start that first year. And then when we left town, all of a sudden, he went absolutely insane. But I remember, he was sitting at the top of the order, and it was just this skinny kid at the time, but you couldn't get him out, and he was electric on the bases. And he didn't mind talking to the other team a little bit and letting them know that he had a pretty good feel for what was going on. And just one of those guys that, when you're in a long season in single A and sometimes things are a grind and new players are coming in and out, when you could watch a guy like that play, you were excited to go to the ballpark and never know what's going to happen.
Now, when I went to Myrtle Beach, one guy that I wasn't expecting, like sometimes you look down and you're like, okay, I want to see this guy. All of a sudden, I saw Moises Ballesteros, and I was like, oh man, this kid's got something, like even just his presence, something about him was different than everyone else on the field. What do you remember about Moises?
He was another guy that was just a kid, and you're like, you see his numbers as you're getting ready to play Myrtle Beach, and he's hitting 360, 370, and you're thinking, how is he doing that? And then you see him take batting practice, And again, he's physically imposing, just a big guy, but the bat and the hands were so quick. And the way there's guys when you're in the ballpark and it's empty, that the sound of their bat hitting the ball is different than anybody else's. And I think he was one of those guys. And it was kind of him and Felix Stevens was there at the same time. And they were both just monstrous human beings at 18 and 19 and 17 years old. And you're like, I don't remember guys being that big in their teens when I was that age.
Right. Now, one guy that I interviewed when he was in Myrtle Beach, and it was fresh out of high school, was James Triantos. And he was a guy that, to me, he's just an interest. People forget how young he still is. He's only 22, but he feels like he's been in the Cubs system forever.
He was, and it was funny because there were other guys at the time, and obviously he's been a guy that's made himself very notable and a name, but at the time he was sort of on the periphery of being a name. But there were other guys on their team the year he was in Myrtle Beach who you were like, okay, those are the guys that are the quote unquote headliners. But every day he was playing third base, 18, 19 years old, doing a great job defensively, and then just pesky, right? Like, you couldn't strike him out, put the bat on the ball, some extra base hits mixed in. And Buddy Bailey, who had been around for the longest time, was managing these young, exciting kids. And it was kind of a cool situation to watch.
Now, you mentioned Kevin Alcantara, and when you see him like that, he's another one that has like that star quality. Like, you just are like, oh my God, he's just an impressive human being.
I saw him for the first time when he started doing the Jaguar around second when he hit a home run. And as the visiting team or the opposite team, you didn't know the story. So I'm like, what is he doing exactly when he's rounding the bases? So Sam quickly informed me what it was. Yep, there you go. And I'll tell you this, I'm excited to be able to be excited when he hits a baseball the way he does, as opposed to dreading when he came to the plate when I was working for the other team, because he was phenomenal. And I remember a game in Charleston, he tried to make a charging catch on a sinking line drive, and it got lost in the lights and it hit him in the forehead and he went down, and everybody's like, oh my God. And then he got up and was at the plate the next inning. So a slight guy, but very tall and lanky and the long levers, but man, is he fun to watch play baseball. And I'm excited to do it again, wearing the same colors that I am.
Nice. We talked about Triantos. Let's talk about his fellow Ginger, Owen Casey, the Canadian. What do you remember from Owen's time in the Carolina League?
I remember some impressive contact and some long, towering fly balls or home runs. And Myrtle Beach has that bleacher section behind left field that a lot of home run balls in there, but he had a couple over in batting practice, and during the games he would run into one. And I think it was kind of just before he exploded when I saw him, but you could tell that there was something there. Again, just the way he was in the batter's box and the presence that he showed at the plate, that, not everybody was going to be able to get to the point where he was going to be at some point.
Now, a couple of guys that really passed through Myrtle Beach. I don't know how much you got to see them, but hopefully going to be big part of the Cubs season in 2025. Matt Shaw, 23 years old, third baseman. The Cubs are obviously going to kind of depend. I don't want to say heavily on him, but he's going to get it looks like third base job is his. What did you get to see from Matt Shaw when he was in the Carolina League?
Unfortunately, I never saw him. He was there for such a short period of time, and we never played Myrtle Beach at that point. But obviously, I've been following how quickly he's risen through the organization, and you're seeing college guys do that now in a way that they didn't used to do it. And the other guy, and obviously he's not a Cubs prospect anymore, but I had the Cam Smith series when he hit a home run in every game of the series, and I'm like, this is insane. But obviously Shaw had a similar impact at a number of stops throughout the organization so far. And
Cam Smith is killing it in spring training too right now. You're just like, oh boy, let's see what happens. Hopefully, like I said, it was all the right decision. If we can keep Kyle Tucker, then it's okay. Oh boy. And did you have a chance to see Cade Horton pitch?
Unfortunately, no. Also, we played Myrtle Beach in Myrtle Beach, the opening series of 22. He was scheduled to throw on Sunday, and Sunday got rained out by torrential downpours like 5 hours before the game. And by the time we came around to play Myrtle Beach again, he was long gone. But obviously a guy that has incredible stuff, and you just hope he's healthy and can't wait to see what he does this year, hopefully at least for a little bit of time in Des Moines.
Are there any other Cubs that I didn't mention that you were just kind of like, okay, this is a guy. This guy has a really good chance of being a successful major leaguer?
Yeah, I think the first year in 2021, Myrtle Beach wasn't a great team that year, but Pablo Aliendo was really impressive. He was sort of their leader that year in an emotional way. He had a couple of big plays, and he was another guy that was very exuberant when he did something. And I think when you're going through a minor league season, you need some of those guys just to kind of to keep everybody on their toes and energized. So he was really good. Jefferson Rojas was really impressive. There's some pitchers too. Grant Kipp out of an Ivy League school that just dominated. There's a number of guys. Nick Hall was really good for a guy that wasn't necessarily a huge prospect there in Myrtle Beach. But they've had a number of guys that just do things really well, little things, international guys that can run and hit and play defense and aren't necessarily going to hit for power, but are really, really tough outs, which is what you love to see. Pedro Ramirez is another one of those guys kind of along that line.
So you've been broadcasting now for 10 years. Who do you think, as far as out of all those 10 years, what is a player that you saw that you were like, that later on had just a great MLB career that you were like, wow, I was so privileged to see this guy. I knew right away that this guy was going to be great.
It's a great question. From a River Dogs perspective, Taj Bradley, and he hasn't had a great career yet. He's just getting started, but he was different than anybody else on those pitching staffs, and I think he's going to be the ace for the Rays this year. Actually, I wouldn't call his career great, but it was a Cubs guy at the time in Eloy Jimenez. I thought seeing him in person, I was like, this kid is unreal and just larger than life. The other two were on the same team in Lansing, Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. The ball flies in Lansing, and those two really don't need any help. So when they hit the ball, you're like, come on, this is absolutely ridiculous. But, you know, I was in independent ball early in my career. So when I got to affiliated ball, Tyler Stevenson, the Reds catcher, was really good. And you know, he's not a star in Major League Baseball, but those kind of guys were really fun to watch. And I think 10 years sounds like a long time, but a lot of those guys were 18, so they're still getting into the primes of their career. So I don't know that there's been anybody that has been great to this point yet, but I'm sure in the coming years. Jeremy Pena was with us in Quad Cities. He was really, really good, and obviously he's had a couple of big years. A World Series MVP isn't too bad of an award early in your career.
No. I got to ask you basic ballpark questions here. What's your go-to food if you're going to a ballpark? What's your go-to?
Well, I can say this again now that I'm back in the Midwest. I will get a cheese curd anywhere in the world. And it was something that in Charleston, there were a few places that claimed to have Wisconsin cheese curds, and they weren't really Wisconsin cheese curds. Luckily, the River Dogs got some good ones in the last 2 years. But I think I've had 4 or 5 different meals with cheese curds since I got to Des Moines in like 12 days.
Oh yeah. And when you're in Des Moines at Principal Park, you got to try the Salsa King salsa. That's pretty good there. I'm just going to throw that plug in there. And as far as it goes, if you were a ball player right now, what would your walk-up music be?
I think it would be, this is an old song, My Time by Fabulous. It's from the 2010s. My high school walk-up was This Is the Way I Live, which is another old semi-rap song. But I think My Time by Fabulous, it's still a good song. You know, it stays relevant today. Anybody who's playing baseball right now would have no clue what I'm talking about.
All right, last question for you here. Have you been to Wrigley Field in your lifetime?
Believe it or not, I have not. And the problem is I'm from small town Wisconsin. Going to a game was always a privilege. We just didn't do it all that often. And now that I've been in baseball, it's almost impossible to try and get somewhere unless you're going to do it for that 2 weeks after our season ends and then the big league season. But I'm certainly hoping that I can cross that off here in the very near future. I've been to Great American Ballpark, Target Field, AmFam Field, formerly Miller Park in Milwaukee, but those are the only ones, and then the Trop, of course. So I'm missing a lot of really important ones, and obviously Wrigley is pretty high there on the list, and I'm hopeful to get out there at some point this year.
Well, Jason, we're so super excited to have you in the Cubs family. And, we got a lot of good fans on here really saying about how excited they are here and welcoming you to the Cubs family. There's Steve, Chip Paleo, a bunch of great guys that are just absolutely excited to have you. Our good friend, Rich Biesterfeld, photographer extraordinaire, met you when he was calling the game for Charleston and Myrtle Beach. And so there's a lot of Cub fans super excited for you. Why don't you tell the rest of our listeners where they can follow you on the socials, because they're going to want to follow you right away.
Yeah, I have to get an Instagram. I'll be honest. I haven't had one. I haven't felt like my life was interesting enough, but I think maybe getting this job is the tipping point that'll convince me to do that here in the near future. But on X, it's at JKemp Radio, JKEMP Radio. And we'll have all kinds of fun stuff there, and hoping to give people this year a little bit of a behind the scenes look at the players and their personalities as well. So we have a lot of fun stuff that we're working on in Iowa. And obviously, like we've talked about, it should be a really fun group.
Absolutely. And again, as we say, as Cub fans say, in Des Moines, the city is buzzing, the steak de Burgo, all the fun things that we love about Iowa, and the bait shop, one of my favorite places to go to. Absolutely love it. If you haven't been to Principal Park, I really just can't speak highly enough of what a great organization is and how much fun it is. Chip saying that it's definitely on his bucket list. And so, Jason, welcome to the Cubs family. We're so excited to have you, and thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and looking forward to meeting you and so many others in person. Absolutely, my friend. And remember, Malort at CubCon next year. Sounds good.
It's all over.